But before we get to that interview, I'm just going to lead it off because it's what's going on with Bryan Harsin, the hot topic in the SEC. Derek Mason to Oklahoma State. We already knew that was going to happen, but his salary figures were released here on Monday, and it's just kind of more damning evidence of, kind of what Bryan was telling us. Derek Mason was very unhappy working at Auburn for Bryan Harsin. Read into that how you will with the current Harsin situation, but Derek Mason took a $400,000 pay cut to leave Auburn to coach at Oklahoma State for the same position. Of course, defensive coordinator to be Mike Gundy's defensive coordinator. So I don't know. That's a little damning that he's taken such a cut to go to Oklahoma State. So read into that how you will. But that was not the only Auburn news we had here on Monday, because the school, in an attempt to kind of clarify, kind of update where the situation is with Bryan Harsin, they released the following statement. I'm going to throw it up on the YouTube, and I'll read it here for the audience. The Auburn administration is judiciously collecting information from a variety of perspectives, including our student athletes, and moving swiftly to understand any issues in accordance with university policy and procedures. Decisions regarding the future of Auburn and its athletic programs, as always, are made in the interest of our great university and in fairness to all concerned. We do not make institutional decisions based on social media, posts, or media headlines. And I mean, I'm just reading between the lines here. What are they trying to say? It certainly seems like we're trying to buy this guy out and we're trying to do it for as little as possible. There's been reports that they've asked Bryan Harsin to step down. He said, hell no. He's still on vacation. He's still drinking his Mai Tai on the beach there in Mexico. He hasn't even rushed back to fight for his job. And I think, he's just in a place where they may not have anything on him to fire him for cause. So he's calling their bluff saying, hey, if you're going to fire me, pay me my $18 million, whatever it is, and go find you another coach. But until that time, until I get that check, I'm planning on being at Auburn. And that's where things are here as of recording here on Monday evening at 7 o'clock Central Time. So again, we'll keep you updated, but some pretty interesting comments from Brian Stutlz, who shed some insight into the Austin Davis situation, why he left after just a couple weeks on the job on the Plains. What's next for Auburn? Does Bryan Harsin have any chance to survive this? And, how much does Auburn being just a complete shit show at the moment, how does that hurt potential future candidates, provided the Tigers have to move on from Harsin as expected? So, really appreciate Bryan joining the show once again, second time in 2 weeks here. I think it's the first time in the show's history that we've reached out to someone so quickly, but that's just how big of a deal this is. So let's kick it over to our interview with Brian Stutlz of Auburn Sports. Well, we're pleased to once again be joined by Brian Stutlz. You got to give him a follow on the Twitter at Brian J. Stutlz. You can find that in the show notes. And he covers, of course, the Auburn Tigers for auburnsports.com, part of the Rivals Network. Brian, thanks again for just a quick turnaround. I've never had someone come on the show twice in about a 3-week span, so I really appreciate you joining me again.
Hey, anytime, my pleasure. And things are happening right now on the plains that are just insane. So happy to talk.
Yeah, and I mean, it was just days after we were discussing Derek Mason and what was going on with that, and certainly in Oklahoma State, that's a fine program, but in my opinion, and I'm sure in yours as well, stepped down from the Auburn Tigers in the SEC. So then we got this Austin Davis situation, and I still don't really understand what happened there. So before we get to all the Bryan Harsin stuff, do you have any idea what in the world happened to Austin Davis and why he was only on the job for a couple weeks there?
Well, from what we were told, he has family issues that he wants to take care of, but I think there has to be more than that. I think he came in, saw the dysfunction within the coaching staff and the program that is occurring right now, and maybe he said, hey, I made a mistake. Can I get out of my contract? and told Harsin, this is not the place for me. I mean, he's not from the SEC. He came all the way from Seattle, and maybe he decided, maybe he had second thoughts, and that's what I think happened. But from what we were told, and the statement said that he was stepping away to deal with family issues. So if that's the case, I hope everything's all right with him and his family. But yeah, it's a complete crap show in Auburn right now, like I've never seen before, and it's only going to get worse the next 24, 48 hours, I think.
Yeah, and so of course, the big topic, Bryan Harsin, will he stay, won't he stay? I'll get to that in just a moment, but all this wave of momentum to kind of, I don't want to say push him out. I don't know if that's the right term, but did it begin with Austin Davis leaving? Did it really start with the Tigers failing to sign any prospects on National Signing Day? What was it you think that was the final push that really caused the momentum to go in this direction for Bryan Harsin?
To be honest with you, I think it began the moment he stepped on campus. Alan Green kind of went away from what the boosters and the board of trustees wanted with the hire by hiring Bryan Harsin, and the 6-7 season, 5-game losing streak, finishing behind programs like Kentucky, Missouri, and recruiting, not getting along, all the 20 players in the transfer portal, all this stuff just happening, and it's piling on itself. And then Austin Davis and National Signing Day, nobody signing it. And basically, they've been looking for a reason to get rid of him with cause, and they think they found a reason. We don't know what it is, but this is probably going to drag on for a while. I think this is going to be like not like a Jerry Pruitt situation, but because he had NCAA violations. Mm-hmm. But this is going to involve some lawyers and things like that. But to answer your question, I think it started the day he stepped foot on campus.
And based on just the wave of momentum, I've seen what you've said on social media, but I'm assuming not the entire audience has seen it. Any chance in your mind that Bryan Harsin survives this ordeal at Auburn?
I just don't see how. I don't see how he comes back from this and still has his pride intact after all that's been going on. I don't see how Auburn and him coexist anymore, especially if Alan Green, the guy who hired him, is also going to get the axe, which is probably the case. I mean, his contract runs out, I think, this summer anyway, and the athletic department has been pressuring him to get another job for at least a year now. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he's pretty much a dead horse, and he was the one that had Harsin's back, plus everything that's going on with Harsin, going on to ESPN and telling him all the things are bullshit that's being said about him, and kind of going back after the powers at Auburn. Yeah, there's just no way he and Auburn can coexist anymore, and I just don't think he survives this.
Mm-hmm. Now, Auburn released a statement here on Monday, and I'm going to read it word for word here, and then I'm going to ask you your thoughts on what your read is here. But the statement from Auburn: the Auburn administration is judiciously collecting information from a variety of perspectives, including our student athletes, and moving swiftly to understand any issues in accordance with university policies and procedures. Decisions regarding the future of Auburn and its athletics programs, as always, are made in the interest of our great university and in fairness to all concerned. We do not make institutional decisions based on social media posts or media headlines. That's the end of the statement. So what's your read on that statement, Bryan?
I think that's the first dagger in Harsin's coffin. I mean, he's not even mentioned in the statement, and that says everything. Mm-hmm. And, excuse me, but some people have been trying to start a Save Harsin hashtag or Keep Harsin, or and there was like a little rally down at Tumors Corner yesterday with about 24 people trying to get the administration to pay attention to them, but it's not going to happen. I mean, some people are fans of them, but all the stuff that I've heard and have confirmed that's going on within the department and with the university, this is the first dagger in his coffin. And if he's the coach by this weekend, then something's really, really wrong.
Hmm. Now, I don't want to put you in an awkward spot here because, if you missed our previous interview, Bryan is personal friends with Hugh Freeze, and we've even discussed him potentially taking over one day at Auburn. So I'll ask it to you this way, Bryan. If Harsin's let go for, whatever the reason is, if Hugh Freeze is offered the Auburn job, how likely do you believe he is to accept it?
Oh, 100% if he's offered it.
Well,
100% if he's offered it.
hmm.
And that's the same as my opinion on last year. He wants the job. He deserves it. And here's what my interview question for any coach that comes in, potential coach, would be, or any factor. My decision factor for any coach coming in would be, will this hire keep Nick Saban and Kirby Smart up at night?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Auburn hiring Hugh Freeze, who has beaten Kirby, who has beaten Saban, who's had top 5 recruiting classes, who has made Liberty into quite a power in the independent. He's taken them to 3 straight bowl games. He turned Malik into a first round pick. He's won his bowl games. He's 6-1, I think. I mean, he's from the South. He's from the SEC. Why wouldn't you go after him, knowing that this is going to cause a stir, and that it will make Alabama and Georgia and other teams say, "Whoa, now Auburn's getting serious."
Mm-hmm.
That Harsin hire didn't make a major stir. Any other hire right now is not going to make a major stir. I think Hugh is the man for the job. Now, if the powers and the boosters and the board want somebody else, they'll go after somebody else. But if I was them, and I do have bias here, but I'm also a football fan, and I see what he's done at Ole Miss and Liberty, and especially at Liberty now, and think that he would be the best hire. I think he could unite the fan base, and that he would, kind of bring honor and prestige back to a program that really needs it right now.
Any other, maybe this is, get putting the cart before the horse here, but any other potential candidates? I've heard Will Muschamp, Dale McGee, any other candidates? If, everything you said about Hugh Freeze makes sense. I think he's a far better candidate than any other one that I've heard. But any other potential candidates that you think Auburn could look at if it's not Hugh Freeze?
Well, a lot of people are mentioning Kevin Steele, which would be a complete unmitigated disaster that would make half the fan base maybe give up season tickets after the backstabbing he did with Gus Malzahn, and the fact that there was a Stop Steele movement last year when it looked like he was going to get the job. No one wants him. He's a great assistant, but what he did at Auburn and basically backstabbing to get the job when Malzahn still had it, and then just moving from job to job now, it would be a monumental mistake by the hiring committee.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but wouldn't that also, you're broadcasting that you're letting the damn boosters pick who the coach is, and if they ain't happy, that's who they wanted before, if I'm not mistaken. So it's almost like, who in the hell's running your program if you're going back to who they wanted? Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if the boosters get the way and the powerful board members get the way, it might be Kevin Steele. Who knows? I think they'll look at the optics of it, and if they're smart enough and love Auburn enough, I think they'll look at the optics of it and say, "Hey, this is not a great idea. His head coaching record is awful. Yes, he's a great assistant, but what he did to Auburn, what he did to that entire tenure, the last 2 years, where." I don't even think him and Malzahn were on speaking terms when they were coaching together, and just how he kept on getting backstabbing into the Malzahn hire. I just don't see how you can hire him and expect the Auburn fan base to be like, "Oh, okay, that's good." Mm-hmm. And plus, his hire is not going to make any splash. He's, like I said, a good assistant, but his head coaching record it speaks for itself. It's not good, and he's also in his 60s, so the amount of time he could handle being a head coach is also a problem. So you need someone who's established and someone who will come in here and clean the program up and win over the fan base. And there's very few people who can do that right now.
And how complicated does it make the situation, we're hearing all these allegations, all these rumors, you got assistants coming in and out, you got players transferring, you didn't sign anybody, and do we even know? You throw all that on top. You already referenced the AD, Alan Green. He's likely gone. The school president, they just announced, he's essentially a lame duck. He'll be gone in a couple months. Who's even going to be making this hire if a hire is going to be made? Do you have any idea who gets final say on the next Auburn football coach?
Well, I wouldn't say the sitting president is the lame duck. He decided to retire. He came back after the whole Stephen Lee disaster, which resulted in Malzahn's big contract and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the president before, and he's really popular. But he decided it was time for him to retire. So they're bringing in a new guy who's well respected among everyone at Auburn. He's the current head of the engineering school, and they will both, I think, have some influence in the hire. There's a guy named General Burgess in the athletic department who was in Stanford Hall, the main administration building, that kind of took over after some griping by coaches about Alan Green, and he moved his office to the athletic department, and he's making a lot of decisions as well. So between him, the boosters, the board of trustees, and the current president and the soon-to-be president, I think there'll be a number of voices in who's hired.
Mm-hmm. All right, last thing for you, Bryan. I really appreciate all your time. Do you think any potential candidates here will be scared off by the lack of alignment, so to speak, at Auburn? Because we've heard, that was a rumor with Billy Napier. We've seen Brent Venables essentially, he basically called Auburn out when he got introduced at Oklahoma. Is that going to scare anyone off here, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think it scared Kirby Smart off after the Chiswick disaster in 2012. I think it scared. You already said it. Venables already talked about it. These optics of Auburn nationally and especially regionally in the Southeast right now is awful, and it won't change unless the board of trustees and all these boosters can unite behind one cause, which is Auburn. And I just don't think that's never been the case. Mm-hmm. They all want a power. They all want to be a part of the power struggle. They all want to have the upper hand in the power struggle. And if that means that a coach is fired after 1 year, that's fine. Auburn has all the money in the world to spend on, buyouts and things like that. But it's not going to. This program will not be great. It will not be in Alabama or Georgia until they get the right coach and get everyone behind him. And that's the biggest concern for me.
All right, powerful stuff, Bryan. I really appreciate you. Bryan Stutlz, give him a follow, Bryan J. Stutlz, and check out his work at auburnsports.com covering the Tigers. I really appreciate it, my man. Thanks for coming back so soon.
Anytime, my friend. Love it.
All right, so want to say thanks again to Bryan for joining the show. Really appreciate the insight into what's going on down there at Auburn, and he's not afraid to say, Hugh Freeze down on the Plains. I think he's making a lot of good points. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Hugh Freeze, but can't argue with his record, can't argue with the success he has on the field and in recruiting. And I think he said it perfectly. Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, they'd much rather face Bryan Harsin than they would Hugh Freeze. And that probably tells you all you need to know about which direction Auburn should go in there if they do, in fact, move on from Bryan Harsin as expected. But, of course, we'll keep updated on the situation as the world turns down there on the Plains. It's getting more and more interesting, and cannot wait to see where this thing goes next.